Hi, and welcome to the 700 Club. Iran made a big mistake. Those are the words of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after Iran launched a massive missile strike against the Jewish state yesterday. Now the world is waiting to see how Israel responds.
Well, millions of Israelis huddled in shelters after Iran fired more than 180 missiles. Israel's defense systems intercepted most of them, but a few did make impact. CBN's Julie Stahl has the story.
Iran hurled 181 ballistic missiles at Israel, creating terrifying visions in the skies all over the country.
Certainly this was a significant attack, probably about twice the size in terms of scope of what we saw earlier.
Almost 10 million Israelis were forced to scramble to shelters and hunker down. The barrage was aimed at 3 Israeli military bases and Mossad headquarters, but the missiles came streaking down at civilian populations from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. Israel intercepted most of the rockets, but some hit. One killed a Palestinian in Jericho, the only fatality. Another hit a Chabad school in Gadara, resulting in extensive damage, but no students were harmed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised America for warning Israel in advance of the attack and shooting down a dozen of the incoming missiles.
I also thank the United States for its support in our defense effort.
Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei reportedly ordered the strike in retaliation for Israel's decimation of Hezbollah and the assassinations of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh. Khamenei is in a secure location as Israel vows to strike back.
Iran made a big mistake tonight, and it will pay for it. The regime in Iran does not understand our determination to defend ourselves and our determination to retaliate against our enemies.
The White House not only expects a strong response, it's suggesting America will help.
Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel.
We have made clear that there will be consequences, severe consequences for this attack, and we will work with Israel to make that the case.
Iran, however, is warning it will respond with a larger attack to any Israeli retaliation. About a half hour before the Iranian barrage, Palestinians carried out one of the worst terror attacks inside Israel in recent years. Terrorists from Hebron opened fire on the Tel Aviv light rail and then went on a shooting and stabbing spree in Tel Aviv, murdering 7 Israelis. And on Wednesday, Hezbollah continued to launch rockets at northern Israeli communities, while Israel continued with its targeted raids on Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
All right, Julie, thank you so much. Jonathan Conricus is a former IDF spokesman and a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He joins us now from Tel Aviv. Jonathan, thanks for being with us. After the attack in April, Israel's response was restrained. What's the thinking of how Israel responds this time around?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me. I think that we will see a different Israeli response. It will be much more powerful and much more impactful. It depends, in my mind, on 2 different issues. One, what will the strategic aim be? What will Israel want to achieve strategically in the long term? And 2, what kind of support will Israel get from the United States of America, and how well can Israel align its own strategy with that of U.S. foreign policy? There are, in my mind, 3 different types of targets that Israel can strike. It could be either seats of government and the leaders themselves of the Iranian regime. It can be the economic military infrastructure that supports Iran's malign activities in the region, what enables them to export weapons and money to different terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. And the third bucket or type of targets could be the ever important Iranian nuclear military facilities. It really depends on what Israel wants to achieve, but Israel has the ability to strike all of those, and we'll have to see how well Israel aligns itself with the U.S., and then there will be an Israeli response.
Well, you mentioned the nuclear facilities. Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett is calling this an opportunity to take out Iran's nuclear program. Do you think that is likely?
Well, I definitely agree, and former Prime Minister Bennett has been, I think he was the first Israeli prime minister to enact a different strategy and to promote a different strategy that wants to take the battle directly to Iran. Sadly, that has not been Israeli strategy for the last 15, 20 years. Maybe now Israel will change, and maybe now Israel will take action against this regime. Israel has in the past, in history, Israel has taken unilateral action against nuclear military programs by tyrannical regimes. It took out the Iraqi nuclear plan in 1981 and the Syrian one in 2007. So this wouldn't be the first one. But I think that it's definitely something that should be on the table. And if and when Israel does such a thing, it of course needs strong and very well coordinated efforts together with the U.S., not necessarily U.S. participating in the strike, but that the U.S. sees eye to eye with Israel in this matter.
Jonathan, with Hamas and Hezbollah, you could say, on their heels, and two maybe failed attacks against Israel, how vulnerable is Iran right now? Are they vulnerable at all?
Iran is vulnerable, and I think that vulnerability has been on full display for quite a while. Israel hasn't really pounced on it, but Iran is vulnerable. And as you say correctly, there's a very direct link between Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran, because the Iranians spend about $1 billion every year to Hezbollah in order to equip Hezbollah with the best and massive amounts of weapons in Lebanon, so that would serve as something of a deterrent against Israel striking Iranian nuclear facilities. That deterrent, I'm not sure, exists to such a similar level anymore. Hezbollah, I think, would have wanted to strike back at Israel much harder after Israel took out Hassan Nasrallah, their leader. It hasn't. And I think that's mostly due to a lack of capacity, not a shortcoming in will. So there's definitely a new situation here. Iran is exposed, and I think that in the coming days, we will see exactly how exposed Iran is and what Israel will do in retaliation for this massive attack against Israel last night.
You know, Jonathan, in the U.S., when we hear missiles are launched in Israel, we take it for granted because of the Iron Dome. Okay, so Israel's missile defense system successfully defended against this massive attack yesterday. So consider, without this system, what would Jerusalem and Tel Aviv look like today?
Oh, horrible. There would be tremendous destruction. There would be structural damage. There would be casualties. Luckily, only one person was killed last night. As ironically as that is, he was a Palestinian from Gaza who was in the southern part of Judea and Samaria, and a rocket fell on him and he was killed. But other than that, no bodily harm. But if we didn't have the Iron Dome, the David Sling, and the Arrow, and by the way, it's important for me as an Israeli to take this good opportunity and say thank you. Thank you to the United States of America for many years of investing together in joint air defense programs. All of the systems that I just said, Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow, which are the three different layers of Israeli air defenses, are joint programs that have been made possible through congressional funding and through joint development between Israel and the U.S. And they, for the second time, have proved that the investment was really in place, and they have saved countless lives. And that's an opportunity for me as an Israeli to say thank you for all the good Americans watching it who have had some kind of influence in telling their elected officials to support congressional aid packages to Israel and to continue joint R&D between Israel and the U.S.
All right, everyone, that is Jonathan Conricus. And as always, Jonathan, we thank you so much for joining us today and bringing your insights. In other news, the vice presidential candidates took the debate stage in New York last night. You might have seen that. Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Walz kept it cordial as they each made the case for their presidential candidate. And CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody, has the story.
What was billed as an open mic brawl turned instead into a relatively respectful and thoughtful debate. Tim Walz appeared to have opening jitters and misspoke when asked about the current situation between Iran and Israel.
Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental.
Eventually, he got around to blaming the former president for the current mess in the Middle East.
So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership.
J.D. Vance turned it around to the ones now in charge.
And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration.
On Americans' #1 issue, the economy, Walz again went retro, pointing to Trump's record as president.
He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever.
Vance quickly responded with a comeback about how people are suffering today.
Honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record.
One of the more animated exchanges came on the abortion issue when Vance challenged Walz on a controversial bill that he championed just last year.
The statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And
Vance was on his game all night long. As for Walz, he ran into trouble by misspeaking when asked about changing his position on gun control. He said he became friends with school shooters.
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters.
And he also got called out online about saying he was in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests back in 1989 when he wasn't.
But I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric.
Walz did try and end strong, bringing up the contested 2020 election in order to paint Trump and Vance as a threat to democracy.
He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
As for answers as to who might win this upcoming presidential election, however, the VP debate didn't seem to settle anything at all. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, David. No surprise, of course, Walz went after Trump. That's his job. But even Walz didn't seem to believe it when he said it was the Trump administration's fault that Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon today. But I'll tell you something that was really striking to me is when the moderators went against the rules and fact-checked J.D. Vance, and then when he said, look, if you're going to fact-check me, let me defend myself, he did so, and then he was chided and kind of mocked for going through the legal process. I mean, for people who support Trump and say these debates can be unfair, that's red meat for them because you saw it happen. So J.D. Vance certainly didn't seem to hurt himself, and Walz came off as his everyday American folksy self. Does it move the needle? Probably not, but we'll see. Election soon to come.